Welcome back to Finding Joy in Life's Sticky Moments. We are so glad that you're with us. If you're looking for us, remember that we are every second and fourth Wednesday of the month. You can find us anywhere that you listen to podcasts on YouTube or at Reed Memorial's website, which is reedchurchaugusta.org. And don't forget, on our website, we have a great resource page for you and a devotional that goes along with each and every podcast. So today, I have a very special friend with me. We have Jennifer Frantom. I'm so glad that you're here with us today, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm great. I'm glad to be here.
Well, tell everybody that's listening today a little bit about yourself and where you're from and all that good stuff.
Sure. Well, I am originally from Lexington, South Carolina, so about an hour away. Moved to Augusta, I guess about 7 years ago. I've been married to Sean for 6 years, and we have 2 little boys, Charles, who is 5 years old. He's a kindergartner, and William, who is almost 3.
Wow, well, that sounds like everything's going well. What do you do outside of being a mom and a wife?
Yes, well,
which is a big enough job.
It is. So I actually am the development director at Safe Homes of Augusta, and I've been there for 7 years. Love my job, love the people I work with. It's been a huge blessing for our family over this time, especially with everything that we've had going on.
Wow, so it sounds like you have a lot on your plate, but a lot of fun things. You've got 2 great boys, a great husband, a great job. So where is this sticky moment?
Well, our sticky moment was when my son, my youngest, was 10 days old. He was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis.
Wow.
And cystic fibrosis, a lot of people have heard of it, but aren't really familiar with what that is. I had heard of it. I only knew one person in my whole life who has cystic fibrosis and really didn't know a lot about it. If I back up a little bit, my oldest son, when he was born, they do a newborn heel prick at the hospital.
Yes.
And one of the things that they look for is a marker for cystic fibrosis. And I'll refer to it probably as CF throughout this podcast. So they looked for CF, and he had a marker that came back as being elevated. And so I got a call. I was first-time mom, knew nothing about it really, and I was kind of concerned, but I also was so just taken with everything of being a new mom that I was
You're
like,
excited.
I was kind of that's not our story, know. And so I looked up a little bit, but not a whole lot. We did take him for a sweat test, which a sweat test is sort of the marker to tell if you have CF. That is.
How old was Charles at this point?
I was not even back from maternity leave, so he was weeks old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there were no, signs that made me think that he had anything wrong, but that's the thing about babies with CF. They look
just like everybody.
Just like everybody else. So, it was kind of in my mind, but not so much. So we went to CHOG. Fortunately, there's a CF center here in Augusta. There's only 2 in our state.
Wow.
So we were blessed that, we live right here. We went for this sweat test. They have us bundle up your baby in a bunch of blankets, and they put this thing on their arm. It doesn't hurt, but they put this thing on their arm. And that is to really essentially make them sweat and to measure the sweat. So CF is all about how salt moves through our body. Oh. And later that day, we found out he does not have CF. He is a carrier. So we were like, yay, okay, moving on.
All right, well, let me ask you before you get past the fact that he's a carrier, how does a child register as a carrier? And I mean, do both parents have to have that? How does that work? And what does that mean for Charles going forward, maybe as a dad himself someday?
That's a great question. So to have CF, both parents have to carry one mutation.
I gotcha.
And so every time that we have a child, they have a 25% chance of having CF, a 50% chance of being a carrier for CF, and a 25% chance of not having anything at all.
Wow.
And so, like I said, I kind of heard, okay, he doesn't have it. I might have asked a couple questions, but didn't really know what to ask. And we moved on. So it wasn't until I was pregnant with my youngest And I remember my doctor, my OB, saying to me, if I wanted to have one of the tests that they do to let you know if your child's going to be born with any different conditions. And I said, probably not, but would it show if he was going to be born with cystic fibrosis? And my doctor said, well, why are you asking that? And I told him, and he said, well, I think that we should find out if you're a carrier, because Charles, my son, he could have very well been a carrier and maybe gotten that from my husband, not from me.
Ah, I see.
So we went ahead. I said, okay. So we moved on with it that day. And I just felt in my heart, And it was about a month later, we got the call from the OB that my test came back that I was a carrier and my husband. So I knew William was born in November. This was August. So I knew those last few months that there was a possibility, but it's still only a 25% chance.
So you're praying really hard at this point.
Right. And, and I kind of have this, I'm the type of person I can deal with whatever's thrown at me, but I have to sort of soak it in first. And looking back, I think that is such a blessing that God gave me that time, because, I know some people, they say, well, I wouldn't want to know, and that's wonderful. For me, I wanted to know, I wanted to learn what I could.
Right.
And
get the tools ready in the toolbox.
Ready, right? and just sort of mentally prepare myself and prepare my heart. And, I always said during pregnancy, once we found that out, my father-in-law died a couple of weeks later. Then the last 3 weeks of my pregnancy, I was on bed rest. I was just, there was something about the way that the blood was getting to him. It wasn't related to CF. It was just one of those things
during pregnancy that
right.
happen.
And we found that out because when babies are born with CF, they have a greater chance of certain complications at birth. And so they wanted to have me go through several additional ultrasounds, and that would at least they would be prepared, in the delivery room. And so I was at my doctor very frequently at that end part, and then I just got, those last few weeks, I got so sick, and nobody could pinpoint why. They checked me for all kinds of things, but ultimately, they were like, you need to stay on your left side as much as possible. A lot of science stuff I don't really understand. So I just, looking back again, it was like my life sort of halted. I was at work, I went to my appointment, and they said, you need to go home and rest. And I was like, okay. So I went back to work, got my stuff, because I was like, well, I'll just work from home. And little did I know that would be my story for a long time thereafter. And so when he was born in the hospital, we found out the pediatrician that was working in the hospital that day, or those few days, he came and sat down with my husband and me one morning, and it was, I think, the day or two before we got discharged. And there were no, we knew we weren't going to know for at least a couple of weeks, from the time he was born. And the doctor came in, and he had his cup of coffee, and he sat down he was really ready to talk with us. And they were calling for my lunch order, and Pastor Matt came by. It was all at the same time. And I just, again, it was I knew kind of it was possible, but I don't think I was still ready to accept that. And so anyway, the doctor said, we're going to he'll do the newborn heel prick. Regardless of how that comes back, you probably want to get additional testing. And so I guess there might have been certain things that pediatrician noticed, at birth.
Wow.
So
were you clued in at that point? Were you like, oh my goodness, okay? Or were you just like, all right, I'll do what he says? I mean,
right.
Were you nervous? Was this a dark period? Were you just very optimistic? How did you feel? I
felt like just kind of empty. I didn't know, empty's not the word, but I didn't know what to feel, Mm-hmm. I didn't know if I felt scared about it or if I felt, I don't think I felt optimistic. I'll say that. I wish I could say that I was one of those people that's just always glass half full. That's just not my nature. Any joy that I have is not, I think, one thing that we may talk about is that today, and finding joy in life's sticky moments. And,
right.
That's something that I definitely think is a choice for some people. And so I didn't know what to feel at that point. So we came home, and those first couple of weeks, he, I had been concerned that his birth weight was a little bit lower than Charles, but it wasn't bad, but he was smaller, and it seemed like he was wanting to eat constantly. And I thought, I'm feeding him. I feel like I was nursing round the clock,
All the
that
time.
whole, every couple of hours was like every 30 minutes. Like, it was
wow.
it wasn't. And I knew that I was producing. And so looking back, I think, oh, now that makes sense.
Sure.
We took our newborn pictures at the house, and, they always want the baby in that kind of sleep coma. He never got to that. So,
like, please get in the sleep
like,
coma. Mama needs some sleep.
Right. And I was like, I just don't understand. Like, So then I noticed he was coughing, and one of the nights it sounded like he was wheezing, and I had didn't know if I really knew what that was, but I thought, I'm going to take him to the doctor tomorrow. And so I did. And even then, in my mind, I thought, with Charles, he would cough sometimes, and they'd say, well, babies cough, no big deal. So I took him, and when I got there, our pediatrician walked in, and he said, it was just William and me. Sean was at work, and he said, oh, I was really hoping your husband was going to be here today. He said, and I think he just sort of blurted out. He didn't, it was just one of those things. He said, I just got off the phone with Emery, and I was going to call you. So I'm not really sure why you're here today, but I was going to call you that his newborn screen came back positive for cystic fibrosis.
Oh, wow. So you're by yourself with your son hearing this, like, life-changing news.
Yes. And I'm like, what does this mean? And so I knew I was going to have a lot of questions, didn't know what questions. And so I, messaged Sean, and I was like, I need you to step out of your meeting and call me. And so
Get here ASAP.
Right. So we're on this phone, and the doctor's telling us some stuff, and he says, but, you have to do the sweat test. Well, I already kind of knew what that was, had been through it, but it just felt different this time. And they were amazing. They got us in the very next morning. We went to CHOG for the sweat test, and bundled him up, and I held him for his 45 minutes, I think it is. I held him, and they want him to sweat. And anyway, about 1:00 that afternoon, we had the results, and even when the pulmonologist and the nurse from the CF Care Center was telling me, and my husband was with me at this point, but even when they were telling us, I remember being like, well, I had kind of two questions. So does he have CF or not? Because you're kind of hearing
all different
you're
things.
You're hearing so much, And they said he does. And I said, well, how many people in Georgia have it? And they said on the registry there's about 800.
Oh, wow.
And so I just...
That's not very many.
No. And so I just went to why,
Right. You probably lost it right then and there, I'm sure.
I did. And, goodness, sorry.
No.
But on the same token, the more I learned about it, and even in that moment, I kept thinking, he knows every hair on our head. And, he knew us in the womb. He knit us together in the womb.
Before we were ever here. Ever a thought.
Yes. And I just kept thinking that. And, why him of 800 people? I don't know, but why not? And he still today, but I mean, even at that little, he was so joyful, he was just so happy. And that's the word I would always use to describe him, is people would ask me, well, how's he doing? And I'm like, well, he's doing well. We're doing all his treatments. We're doing all the stuff, but he's just so joyful, And I don't think that's by mistake.
Right. Right. Well, I will say, I think both your boys are super joyful, and I think that's a product of some great parents too. So let me ask you, you get this news. It is life-changing. And, fast forward just a little bit, like just even when you got home that night with Sean, like, I mean, that's can rock a couple, that rocks a family, that changes how you operate from on a daily basis. I mean, what was your approach to things? What did you decide? Like, was there a moment right then and there, or were you just kind of like, did it evolve? How did that whole journey
Right.
from determining that he had CF to where you are today?
Well, they stayed with us, the pulmonologist and the nurse. They talked with us probably 2 or 3 hours. They sit down and they went over a lot. They answered anything that we could think of at that point in time and kind of told us how things were going to go from here as far as, appointments and things like that. So the dietitian, when we go to clinic, I'll back up a minute, but when we go to clinic, he sees a dietitian, a pulmonologist. There's a pharmacist that checks in with us. There's a psychologist that checks in with us. Right now, she usually, speaks to the parents, but
Sure.
Once the children are a little bit older, that's part of, the child's therapy and development as well, which I think is incredible.
So you have this whole team.
And the dietitian was the first person that we saw from the team that, after the pulmonologist told us, she came in and she was so cheery and happy. And I just thought,
Like,
oh my
I'm not cheery and
gosh.
happy.
But she's so perfect for what she does, you
Right.
know. And she brought in, she's like, okay, so you're going to, when he eats, and mind you, he's a baby, so he's drinking, milk. And I
Right.
was trying to nurse, which was super important to me. And I later had to kind of let go of something, and that was it. But
Did they tell you that, or was that a choice for you because of all the care needs that he had?
it was a choice for me because I needed to know that he was getting X amount of nutrients. And
Gotcha.
I couldn't really quantify that. And I tried to, provide milk in a bottle, but that was so taxing. And having a baby with CF is very physically taxing on the parents. That's something that probably don't think about. It's easier now because he has some equipment that he can do his treatments. But in the beginning, so that first day, she told us, okay, we're going to need applesauce, and these are your enzymes. And every time he eats, you're going to sprinkle the little capsule of enzyme on the applesauce and feed it to him like that. And I'm like, babies can't have applesauce.
Right. You're like, wait. Charles did not eat that way.
He did not eat like that. And she's like, it's okay, but it has to go down with something acidic. And at that point, obviously, they can't swallow pills.
Right.
So we left there with this huge bag full of enzymes and, even just learning, like, where am I going to keep these in my house? Like, the little things that it changed. So he unfortunately got a cold right off the bat, and it took, it was pretty tough on him. And that was the reason that I had taken him for the wheezing and all of that. So they had us go ahead and start his chest therapy a little sooner than they probably would have. We started that. They were going to start it at a month old, but we started it, like 3 weeks old.
Wow. Okay.
Essentially was a little popsicle stick looking thing, tongue depressor rather,
Right.
and had a little suction cup on the end. And we would kind of do like this and beat him, is what they called it, in 10 spots on his lungs. And we would do each spot for 3 to 4 minutes.
Wow.
And on his sides, on his chest, on his back.
And how often did you do this?
So we did that right off the bat. We had to start it 4 times a day. So he would do a nebulizer for about 15 minutes to open up the airways, and then we would do the beating after that. So we started out like full gear with all the things, and baseline is he only does it morning and night. But in the beginning, because he already was sick, we had to do it a little bit more frequently. And once he got through that, we were able to go back down to twice a day. So I remember people saying, it'll become part of your routine, and I thought, when is this going to be part of our routine? Like it seemed, and so for a year, till he was 14 months old, anytime he was sick, we would increase it, but his baseline was twice a day. And we would do these treatments, and then after a treatment, the nebulizer cup had to be sterilized. So not just washed, but sterilized. So it was like, it was a whole lot of stuff adding to our schedule.
And in the meantime, you're still employed.
I'm still employed.
And you still have an older sibling for William.
A 2.5-year-old at
yeah,
that
who's
point.
requiring a lot of attention too. Wow, how did you do that?
It was insane. I don't know.
God gave you the strength to get through that.
We did that together. You know, that's really all I can say. We did that together. It was like, and we tried to always be very, even at that early stage of William's life, tried to never act like the treatment or anything was strenuous, because, you know, eventually he's going to have to do all this on his own.
Right.
And that's the goal, is that, you know, he's old enough and advocating for himself and doing all of these things.
Independent.
So, exactly.
Was that something that you and Sean talked about, like intentionally? Did you sit down and go, we need to have this approach?
We did. And, you know, this is kind of where we balance each other, because Sean is eternally optimistic. And I, you know, I'm kind of the worrier, you know. And so we did somehow, we got through, you know, those first few weeks, and then eventually, you know, it became part of our routine. When he was 14 months, he got his vest, and so he wears, I call it a shaker vest, and he wears that and does the nebulizers at the same time. So
that's in place of the beating, so to
right,
speak. It just shakes it.
And you know, gosh, the beating, that was, I mean, I asked him, I was like, is this gonna like cause him mental, like emotional, you know, thinking like
me at a young age,
right? And you know, but gosh, when we got that vest, it was life-changing. And now he's, you know, almost 3, and he will sit there, you know, we sit by him, but he wants to hold his own mask on his face. And I mean, he knows where the treatment closet is. He knows, you know, we pull that out twice a day. If he's sick, again, we still, you know, do it 3 and 4 times a day. But he's really gained a lot of independence with it. And
have you seen a difference in Charles because of this? And like, how do they relate to one another during this time?
I have, you know, the first time Charles saw us doing the chest therapy manually in the beginning, I remember he walked out and he just froze in his tracks and just looked at me. And here I am, I got, you know, the baby laid on the floor, and I'm doing it. And we would try to play songs. We still do like YouTube songs, but at that point, you know, we would kind of count it by a song. So 3 to 4 minutes, and then move to a new spot. And he just sort of froze, like, what are you doing? You know? And so it was crazy. Looking back, I just...
Now, have you explained to Charles why William gets all this treatment? Does he understand?
He does.
Even at 3, you know, this is what my brother has to do.
Right. You know, we've always just been very open about it. And again, just going back to, I never want him to feel like he's, you know, there's something wrong with him. You know, right. This is, you always hear, you know, well, this doesn't define me. And I thought, gosh, that's so, you know, overused. But, you know, at the same time, we can't ignore it. You know, we go on vacation. We went to Disney World. We did everything.
Yeah.
You know, I'd walked all day, and it was midnight, and I was like, oh no, we haven't done the sterilized. We hadn't sterilized yet. And so there we are, you know, and, but we've learned, you know, little tricks here and there when we travel, or, you know, I want him to have the best quality of life that he can. Right. And, I think, you know, we have to be careful about things, of course, and we have to, you know, remember, you know, we can't skip a treatment. We can't skip our enzymes. These are things that we do.
No matter what.
Right. But that's okay, because you're doing these things,
you're going to have a better quality.
You're going to have a better quality of life. You're going to feel better. And he takes a lot of medicines. In addition to that, we've had about a year-long bout of GI issues that we couldn't really figure out. It sort of almost mimics Crohn's disease, that his, you know, inflammation.
Sure.
We did a scope and discovered that, but it's not Crohn's, but it's a result of, you know, all the mucus and all of the this, I don't even know if I really explain what CF is, but it's, he's got a lot more mucus in his body than the average person.
Okay.
And that mucus is very thick and very sticky. So as a result, it clogs, the pancreas and the lungs. And so the two common issues that people have issues with is their lungs and their pancreas. And that's why he has to take enzymes to eat so he can absorb his food.
Gotcha.
And that's why we do the chest therapy, is so that he can, break up that mucus so he can breathe. Another thing that we've learned along the way, he had a hernia repair surgery,
Wow.
which Charles had the same procedure. It's not anything to do with CF, but in the midst of that, we learned that he has a congenitally absent vas deferens. So we knew that one of the things is that it causes infertility in males. But then it was like, okay, we're here at the hospital for something un-CF related, but it still finds us, know?
Yeah.
And I was like, and I cried so much over that. And I was like, I know this is like a long time, but just the fact that like, it affects all of him, you know what I mean? From, top to bottom, head,
right.
Mind, heart.
From now until
forever.
ever.
And
yes.
so how we, approach it is just going to, I think, make the difference on how compliant he is as he grows.
Sure. And does he, I've got so many questions, but I was thinking about the pandemic and just being around and exposed. Mm-hmm. Obviously you don't want him getting sick. So, golly, what do you do? What are your protocols, even just on a regular given day, not even during a pandemic?
Right. Well, prior to pandemic, I had masks, I had gloves, I had hand sanitizer.
Wait a minute, that sounds like you were prepared for a pandemic.
Right? We stopped wearing shoes in the house. Like, you think about baby crawling around, just so many things that we kind of changed. And then there was this pandemic. And at first I thought, we already do a lot of this, I was concerned, but I also was, at that point,
a little bit.
Right. I felt a little protected, and I was hearing the same thing from others in the CF community as well. Like, we sort of know, we're sort of equipped.
Yeah, we've got this going on, people who don't know.
Right. And then as things got worse, of course, we remained very diligent and very careful throughout. We didn't go anywhere. Car picnics became a thing for us because we would usually go out to eat or something on Friday nights, but it kind of turned into a car picnic. So
I love that idea.
Sort of trash.
Yeah,
now,
we just won't talk about the stains that we see in your car.
But they thought that was the best thing, is to like just go get Chick-fil-A and sit in the parking lot and pop the trunk up, and they would get in the back, And so we had to be creative, and fortunately at those ages, it doesn't take a lot. And so at first, it was okay. And then the more it went on, and then, on and still on, I guess at some point I've had to, just kind of come to be okay with the fact that I know like what we're comfortable with, what we're not comfortable with. And that's that. And pandemic or not, this is kind of what we do. And,
What kind of support is there for folks who have a child or they themselves have CF?
Well, the CF Foundation has been amazing. They're great at connecting people, especially throughout the pandemic. They would do virtual like Zoom things, with other parents, maybe in our state, or there were some that were even kind of across the country. But,
wow.
One thing about CF that I don't think I've mentioned yet, and, when I've gone through tough things, what I find comforting is people who can relate. And with CF, it's dangerous for people with CF to be in close proximity to each other. So 6 feet apart is something that we all have used probably at some point now, social distancing.
Yeah.
That is the reality for CFers on a normal basis. So imagine not having somebody who really knows what I mean, even as he gets older, that's something that I do think about is, I can be the best support in the world to him, but I'm not going to know what it's like to be a teenager and, deal with this and dating and taking my medicine on a date, so my first
putting
date,
my shaker vest on, right? Before I go out for the night,
Right. I'm not going to know what that's like. And so, thankfully there's technology and there's, that virtual platform for them, but it's not really the same.
Right.
At least not probably to those of us who know what it's like without.
Sure.
Now, everything is so tech driven, but, so I do think about that, but, like I said, that was part of our vocabulary long before the pandemic.
So with CF, are there, as the student child ages, what kind of things change? I mean, will he always wear the shaker vest? What other procedures will he have to do or things that he needs to be aware of?
He'll always wear the shaker vest. So there are thousands of mutations, and there are different drugs that are specific to certain mutations. So unless something else, unless there are reactions or things like that, there's a new drug that came out, was it last year or the year before, called Trikafta. And what I hear is that is so life-changing for people with CF, as long as their mutations allow them to take it. Now, there are definitely people who have struggled, especially the one thing I've heard in particular is it elevates their liver enzymes. And so those are things, we'll see. He won't be eligible to take that until it was 12, I believe now it's 6. So we've still got some time. But that will be huge. That's been huge for the CF community. And, but they do still recommend continue your enzymes, continue your chest therapy, continue all your other medications that you're on. And maybe eventually we can back off some of that, but I guess they don't know enough quite yet to say, okay, you can stop everything else.
Gotcha.
So it's something that he'll, do. It's chronic and it's lifelong, but, hopefully, and that's why we are so diligent about germs and things like that now, because hopefully we can keep those lungs as healthy as possible now so that as he grows, they haven't had reoccurring lung infections over and over. And so they aren't as damaged. He gets a chest x-ray once a year, and so because it is progressive, so we can kind of annually, he has all of that coming up on his birthday every year, right? Isn't that perfect?
What a birthday present, not,
I know. But thankfully, they're so wonderful. They've got child life specialists over there who just make everything, oh my goodness, so much easier on the parents. It's incredible.
Well, that brings me to a question, so I hear a lot about William and that struggle and everything he has to do, but as parents, what did that do to your relationship with your husband, to your relationship with your other child? Mm-hmm. And how did it affect your family life on a whole? Like, was there a moment when you're like, okay, this is just too much, God. You've given me more than I can handle. They say, God never gives you more than you can handle. Well, I feel like I've had enough,
Yeah. There are definitely those moments. I mean, even still, there are those moments where, the beginning, it was more, it showed up in ways of, I might be taking a shower and just start crying, and my eternally optimistic husband, I remember saying to him, like, I just feel like I just cry all the time. And like for no reason, I mean, there's a reason, but no real reason.
No trigger.
No
New
trigger.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And he was like, me too, and even when I had first told him about this, I mean, and he wouldn't mind me saying, like, he'll get very choked up talking about William. And so it's funny because what certain things that really cause me a lot of stress or, get me really upset about it don't him, and vice versa. And so
what a great team.
Yes. So I think that has been, huge in dealing with something like this. And my other child, same thing. I mean, we try to be very intentional about, date nights with each other and date nights with our other child.
Uh-huh.
And we don't get a lot of 2-on-1 time, like, my husband and me and Charles, just because
Someone's got to,
you just don't. But, Sean will take him to do certain things, or I'll take him to do certain things. And he's an amazing little boy, and he really owns that whole big brother role. And there's certain times where, I do kind of have to remind him, like, they're still brothers, so it's like, okay, well, he's younger than you. Let's not be so rough, or, things like that, of course. But he really owns that big brother role, and he knows, William's got to do this, William's got to do that. Charles is very structured for a 5-year-old, very routine. So he's picked up on that. And I thought, I hope William's going to be quite as structured, because he's going to need to be.
He's going to need to be. That's right. Well, do you feel like it has brought your family closer in a different way than you ever imagined? I mean,
absolutely.
You're in this fight together, and
absolutely. And we've had, especially going through a pandemic and just things that, completely out of our control. I mean, it's all out of our control, but going through something like that, never would have imagined. So it added a whole other layer of, okay, how are we going to do this? And my husband, he's wonderful about all the treatments and sterilizing those things every night, and just
he's got a good honey-do list.
Yes,
is that what you're saying?
A lot of the day-to-day stuff, and then I'm like okay, let's track, what do we need to tell the doctors, what questions do we need to ask, what appointments do we have coming up. So we've figured out ways to kind of divvy things up, divide and conquer is what we say.
So it sounds to me like you've been very intentional. You said, okay, well, make sure we have date nights. Mm-hmm. So to find joy in this sticky moment, we've still got to nurture ourselves. We got to nurture our other child. We've got to nurture William, and to do that, it's going to take us to be a great team. And you figured out a great system for that. What else do you do that helps you find joy in this journey? Because it is a difficult one, and it's not typical of. Obviously, if only 800 other people in this state have it.
Right.
So how do you find joy in the journey?
Well, one other group of people that I don't think I've mentioned yet, and that is my CF mom friends that I was able to connect with. And they reached out to me. It was kind of like we had similar, friends or acquaintances in common.
Oh, wow.
But they reached out to me, and, I have a group text, and we don't talk all the time, and all of our lives are super busy. But if I have something I'm really worried about, or a question, I don't really want to go to the doctor, or don't need to go to the doctor, we can chat. We'll get together periodically for lunch and just, talk all things,
all things CF.
All things CF. And also we all have another child. So, how that plays into it as well,
and how other people manage, which is great to hear those
right.
tips and those encouraging words, like, this is what we do, and you're
right.
like, oh, okay, that
right
works.
And I think I also I'm blessed. I have a core group of girlfriends that I've been friends with 20 something years, and again, kind of, we all live in different places, but keep that group text going. But there was a period of time where I thought, and even my friends in Augusta, that I thought, gosh, there's a difference between, it's like me and versus them now. Like, not versus, but
I know what you're saying. It's kind of like,
get it. Like,
they don't understand.
They have children, but they are not doing these things, and they don't have these worries. And at some point, I was thinking about that even the other day. At some point, that kind of goes away once we sort of all get on that same page of, okay, they know that, if their child has a cough, we're not going to come around, or, whatever.
Right.
I mean, once we kind of laid that groundwork, a lot of that feeling so isolated kind of went away, at least for me, and again, that's something that I, think about for William as he grows, but at least for me, because at first it felt very isolating. And then that reoccurred the beginning of the pandemic,
Another isolating moment.
Very
sure.
isolating for everybody.
Absolutely.
But, it comes and goes. But I think those are things that really helped me get through. I think God places people in our lives to do his work, and I think that's what he did, And
I would also say, just from what little I know about your story, that people that you don't know and people that you aren't close to, or William isn't close to, have really been encouraging, and the outpouring of love and support for your family and for William and his journey has been kind of tremendous. It's been awesome to watch from, just from an outsider's perspective. So I think that's been really great to see humanity and God working through all these folks, whether they're known to you or not.
Oh, it really has. And our church, oh my goodness, especially, and the Young Women of Faith group, it wasn't my season to be involved in it before. Now it might make more sense why.
Right.
But I have just so enjoyed, getting to know those women and be kind of part of that, because, again, it's like kind of we're all coming from different places, but the core thing is that we love Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. And because of that, we can support each other. And so I just feel really blessed with our church family and just the people that God has put into my life.
So thinking about getting out of a sticky moment, whether it's a hard, difficult diagnosis, whether it's some parenting challenge, what piece of advice would you give somebody going through a difficult moment to help them find joy in the journey?
I think you've got to surround yourself with good people. And I think for me, that's been huge, because it would have been very easy for me to just keep, crying in the shower and, just kind of being in my head and being in those dark moments. But
thinking, why me? Why William?
Right.
Why us?
But when I started to connect again, and when I was able to start connecting again, it made such a difference for me. And whether it's people who know exactly where you've been or not, maybe that doesn't really matter. I think it's good if they do,
Sure.
At least a couple of them.
Right.
But every day with CF is, you don't know what it's going to bring. And that's with anything, you don't know what the day is going to bring. And every time I hear a cough, a CF mom can spot a cough, a mile away. And we're like, oh, goodness,
We're all pseudo-pediatricians is what you're saying.
Right. I read this meme or something when he was first born, and it was like, a worried mom does better research than the FBI. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's me.
Exactly.
So,
he's not going to like that when dating comes around and teenage driving comes around. But right now it's a great thing.
Right now. And, and even with that, I've had to be careful, I've had to be really careful and just say, this is what's going on right now. And this is what's going on today. And I know we've got an amazing care team close by. And I know we've got people in our corner that are praying for us and supporting us and showing up. And, when times have been hard, they've shown up with meals, they've shown up with flowers, shown up with prayers, with just a note, a message. And those things matter so much. They really do.
Well, I have just really enjoyed having this chat with you today and finding out a little bit more about your story. And what it sounds like to me, it sounds like that, finding that group of support, whether it be at church or through fellow CF moms or even just lifelong friends, is a way to get through the journey, and to find joy in that moment and to kind of encourage that you're not alone. God does not leave you alone. He has not forsaken you. He's given you everybody around you. And William is just such a joy. I just love William and Charles. They're both tons of fun. And I'm just so grateful that you shared your story with us today.
Well, thank you. I have enjoyed it and appreciate the opportunity.
Today, we've talked a lot about family, childhood, and children. So we would like to invite you to our Christmas Eve family service, which begins at 4:30. All children, ages 3 through 5th grade, are invited to be a part of this special worship experience. If you have a child or a grandchild or even a child in your neighborhood that would like to participate, just arrive a few minutes early at 4 p.m. to get a costume and enjoy the wonder of Christmas with us at Reed Memorial on Christmas Eve. Join us every second and fourth Wednesday of the month on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and our website, reedchurchaugusta.org.